Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. Our producer, the versatile Justin Stein, as always, on the controls. And on today's episode, we are joined by Corey March, the head of business development and resident fantasy expert on SIS. Always a fun time when we have Corey on. And later in the show, of course, we will have John Verros on for his injury insights. But first, the trade deadline is coming in the NFL, and with a lackluster kind of slate for this weekend, we wanted to start off there because the NFL all of a sudden is becoming like other sports where the trade deadline is a thing. Right, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, not even the trade deadline is a thing. All the trades seem to happen this week. They couldn't get the teams to, if they did it the way they did the draft, they'd get all the teams to make the trades on the same day, and then they'd do a TV show all day, and they'd hype it all up. But we got the trades this week. Mohamed Sanu, Emmanuel Sanders, and Quandre Diggs all changing teams.
Yeah, interesting trades right there. You know, what it makes me think of is in baseball, Vince Gennaro wrote a great book called Diamond Dollars that really explores the concept of the win curve. And this is something that's really established in baseball because with revenue being much less shared and much more individual by team, there's real value. There's monetary value to be gained by making the playoffs, making the World Series, and winning the World Series. And so literally the value of winning your 91st game is worth more money to you than winning your 71st game. And it obviously in football, there's much more revenue sharing that goes on. It's much less relevant in terms of that dollars and cents sort of thing. But in terms of winning, the win curve is still very much a real thing. And you'll see as teams, I think, become more thoughtful, there will be teams that we looked around, before we started recording, we said there's 6 teams with winning records in the AFC. All of those bottom feeders in the NFL right now, they might look to become sellers because the difference between, if a guy's going to make a difference between you winning 4 and 5 games this year, forget about him. So what? I mean, even if we're not talking about tanking, that 5th win doesn't help you at all. Whereas if you're a team with looking like you're going to be a 9-win team, trying to make that to get a 10-win, all of a sudden that player becomes a lot more valuable to you. So I think that's why we see specifically the Sanu and the Sanders deals happening, going from teams that are kind of out of it this year and moving those assets to teams that are trying to get into more of a win-now situation.
No, it's definitely not tanking to trade guys in the middle of the year. I mean, the Atlanta Falcons tried to win this year. And the fact that they're 1-5 means that now it makes sense to trade guys. It's not like they gave up on the year before the year even started. I don't think that that's tanking at all. I think it's just a wise move by them. I think the surprising one is the Lions, because at 2-3-1, they're still in it a little bit, even though the NFC is so deep. They're not. They've played well. They've played better than their record, and so for them to trade a starter for a 5th-round pick, even a safety, is a surprise. As witnessed by all of the surprising responses from all of his teammates on Twitter after the trade.
Yeah, sounds like he's the team captain there and really a guy who drives the whole thing there. It's hard to imagine them getting enough return there for that one. Corey, let's bring you on, our resident fantasy expert, as I mentioned on the intro. What do you make of these deadline moves?
First and foremost, it's good to see teams being more mindful of this type of a thing. I think that lends itself well to the quote-unquote analytics movement. And my question for you guys, I don't really know the answer to this, but how do you guys think players going from one team to another, specifically maybe a Sanu and a Sanders in a skill position type role, transition from one team to another mid-season? You brought up baseball earlier. It's pretty seamless to go from one team to another and just spot into the lineup or spot into the rotation. There's a lot more involved in football.
They've always talked about it being harder in football than in other sports because you have to get the scheme, you have to get the playbook. When it comes to something like the Patriots, they always talk about how hard it is even for veterans to pick up the offense. And there's so many option routes, and you have to be on the same page with Brady. He needs to know when you see such and such a coverage that you're going to cut that in. And he's going to throw it to you there, and you better be seeing the same thing he's seeing. And I would think that it takes time to build that kind of chemistry.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You got to chop it down right now. You got to figure out what you're going to ask them to do, what role they're going to be asked to fill, and you're going to try to teach it as simply and kind of the most basic version of it. So I really think, especially based on my time down in New Orleans, seeing Drew Brees and Sean Payton and all the time that they had together and kind of the compounding interest that they've accumulated of all those years together and being on the same page. You bring a new receiver in there, it's a year before you've even installed everything for that player, that you've really gone through all of the different concepts. So it takes a year, I think, and then an off season. Then you come back the second year. I think at that point you finally started learning things. But then from year 2, year 3, getting all that kind of nuance of the position, that's going to come over more and more time. And you really can't recreate what Brady and Edelman have become with that sort of a connection. You can't recreate, Breeze and Michael Thomas like that. But at the same time, Michael Thomas is a really good player. He's going to be really helpful wherever he is. I think we're seeing Sanu and Sanders, both veteran players, both guys that have been around. I think they're going to be moving into offense where hopefully the terminology will be similar enough. I think a lot of times you've seen teams make moves to kind of make the terminology easier to understand for somebody coming in where they can learn that one position. But no, you can't ask them to play X and Z and F in all of your different schemes and expect them to understand how the nuance of how you're going to be reading certain zone coverages is and how you're going to play quarters in whatever situation. So you got to cut it down. You got to make it kind of more basic for what they can do. That said, that's not a reason they can't produce. And in terms, if you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, at that point, I'm thinking completely, what is the opportunity that this offense creates? Where does this receiver slot in terms of that opportunity? And then you take it from there.
I think it's an incredibly risky proposition from a fantasy perspective. You really don't know what's going to happen when a player goes from one offense to another. Like we saw last year with the Eagles, they went out and got Golden Tate. Seemed like a great move by Howie Roseman and a great addition to that offense, but he just never seemed to gel and mesh with that offense in Philadelphia and was really, really flat from a fantasy perspective and really from a entire football perspective.
And with Sanders, for example, the 49ers, it's been so difficult to figure out what the pecking order has been among their receivers all year that I don't know if you can definitely slot him in as he's the number one now. He's going to get the biggest numbers now. I mean, that's a run-focused offense. I don't know how big the numbers are going to be that he's going to put up.
Yeah, I don't think the volume is necessarily there to sustain him as more than a wide receiver 3. Like you said, run-focused offense. George Kittle seems to be number one in the pecking order, and I don't think the addition of Emmanuel Sanders really affects the amount of volume going to Kittle. But I would expect Sanders to step into that number one most reliable receiver role. Not that that's really that fantasy valuable.
Yeah, less fantasy relevant, but definitely kind of reality football relevant. I think that you look at the Broncos receivers and why they're willing to part with Sanders. Courtland Sutton looks awesome out there. He was running all over the place.
If there's a fantasy winner from these trades, it's Courtland Sutton.
That's a really good point. So some stats by Bryce here on Courtland Sutton. He's 7th among all players with at least 20 targets in receiving total points earned. He's got 20. Emmanuel Sanders is 41st. He's got 10. But then, you look around at the rest of that team and only 2 other 49ers have 20-plus targets. Kittle is 22nd in total points earned receiving. Deebo Samuel is 121st. Then if you go even deeper and you say, okay, anybody with 10-plus targets, look at it on a rate basis. Kendrick Bourne is 77th in total points earned per target. Marquise Goodwin is 78th. Dante Pettis is 137th in total points earned per target. So this is a team that really needed some help on the outside. So I think he'll help there. But again, I think like you guys are saying, from a fantasy perspective, it's not like because he's a number one amongst their receivers, he's suddenly, wide receiver anything in fantasy. All right. Before we move on from that topic, I just wanted to check in and see if either of you are ready to criticize the Patriots for giving up a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu. People have said it. If it was another team that did it, people would feel differently. I think my take is it's a win-win. I think that goes back to the concept of the win curve. The Patriots, where they are on the win curve, Sanu will probably help them win games this year. The Falcons, where they are, who cares if they lose Sanu? I think he's a free agent after this season anyway, and they're picking up huge value. I don't think there's any way to argue they're not a winner, but anybody ready to criticize the Patriots?
I will say Sanu actually has one more year on his contract after this year. So part of the reason why the Patriots could trade it too is because they're getting a player for a year and a half rather than just a half-season rental.
Right, that's important.
And also, it's a late two, right? You expect that they're going to at least make the AFC Championship game. So you expect that it's going to be pick 61 through 64. But I think it's not just the win curve, but the age curve. I think we have finally reached the point of get Tom Brady one more. Like, if we need to sacrifice the future to get Tom Brady one more, we need to get Tom Brady one more. I think that's part of the mindset of the Patriots. That's not necessarily the mindset of other teams.
Good analysis by both of you. I'm definitely not ready to criticize the Patriots.
If there's anything I'm going to criticize the Patriots for, it's that I don't understand the Josh Gordon thing. His knee is apparently not that bad. He's going to be ready to come back in a couple of weeks, and I'm really surprised at the decision to basically let him go. By putting him on IR, and then when he's ready to play, they're going to end up waiving him, essentially letting him go. I don't think that their wide receiver group is deep enough. I can't imagine you're going to get more out of Jacoby Myers or Gunnar Olszewski than you were going to get out of Josh Gordon. I don't understand that move at all.
There's also the N'Keal Harry entering the equation, but it doesn't seem like he's ready to make an impact right off the bat when he returns.
Yeah, hard to make sense of what's going on in that room. I mean, this was a team that we thought they were going to play with Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon all year, and that certainly hasn't been the case. And what about Gronk? Kind of still the specter of the return of Gronk.
I think that specter is a pretty dead specter. I mean, I guess all specters are dead, but it's like extra. I don't think that's one of the ghosts that Sam Darnold was seeing.
The ghost that Sam Darnold was seeing. All right. On that note, let's get into the most important games of this week. Aaron, what do you have? What is the most important game for playoff odds?
All right. Well, let's start with the fact that this is just not a good week. There's just not a lot of winning team against winning team games going on this week. The most important game of the week for playoff odds is actually Oakland at Houston. Houston is in 67% of the time with a win, 37% of the time with a loss. Oakland is in 49% of the time with a win, 21% of the time with a loss.
Yeah, I rewatched the Green Bay Oakland game last night to get a better sense of what was happening there and dive into the film a little bit. And man, I thought Oakland moved the ball offensively. I didn't think there was really a problem there. But when Green Bay had the football, it was just all the things that we hoped for that would come out of the LaFleur-Rodgers. This was our glimmer of that. This was them flashing the upside of what they could be. With all the play action going, jet motion coming across the formation, things like that. You saw the LaFleur element, which is the creation by design and the production that comes by design. And then you add Rodgers' talent on top of that. And then you saw what I thought was just really special there. So absolute torching there. And when I look towards this game, I think no reason to think that Oakland can't move the ball offensively. But even with that, I don't know if they'll have an answer for Deshaun Watson. It's a different offense certainly than what you go against in Green Bay. But it's hard to imagine after watching that Oakland's going to come and have a real answer for Deshaun Watson and what he can provide.
The numbers totally agree with you. I mean, Oakland is surprisingly 8th in offense, DVOA. But they're 30th on defense, including 30th against the pass. And here's what's interesting. I looked up the cornerback coverage numbers, and Kerryon Conley struggled so much this year. I mean, struggled so much that Oakland traded him to Houston, so now he'll get to face his former team in this first week. But Darryl Worley actually is 11th in yards per pass and 8th in success rate. So there is a cornerback playing well in Oakland. It's just the problem is when there's one cornerback playing well is you can avoid that guy.
Yep, it's always about the weakest link. Mm-hmm. Corey, do you have anything you wanted to talk about with this matchup?
Yeah, based on my research, Kerryon Conley had definitely been bad. Maybe a change of scenery will help him. Too soon to tell, but it'll be interesting to see him go against his former team. The Raiders' defense has been giving up a ton of big plays. They've given up 8 touchdowns coming on throws of 20-plus air yards, which is 3 more than anybody else in the league, which is the Redskins and the Dolphins, who are really playing poor football. So I think that's a great opportunity and a great aspect of this game for Watson and his fantasy outlook, specifically a good matchup for Kenny Stills, who's going to be filling that stretching the field void created by Will Fuller. So those are 2 guys that I'm definitely high on this week in fantasy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you about Kenny Stills. This is to be a good game for him now that Fuller is out. Stills totally takes that place. It's also interesting, the pressure, right? Oakland's defense just doesn't bring pressure. So the fact that Houston gets a lot more pressure on offense than most offenses, and that's partly just Deshaun Watson's doing, but Oakland isn't going to bring a lot of pressure. So, Deshaun Watson should face less pressure than he's used to in this game.
One guy who I want to talk about who got paid is Darren Waller. And this is a guy that, I think we all kind of have friends that'll watch Hard Knocks and pick a fantasy sleeper based on who they saw in Hard Knocks that year. And inevitably it doesn't work out and the guy's cut before the season even starts or whatever. Darren Waller's the opposite of that. He is the Hard Knocks success story. He's 13th among all players in receiving total points earned with 17. And he ranks number 3 among tight ends. He's second amongst all players in positive percentage, 76% positive percentage when he's targeted. And just to take a step back about him, we talk about developmental players in the scouting process all the time, and it's always hard to measure against the guy that can come in and produce for you now versus somebody with the developmental upside of somebody like Darren Waller. And he's been through it all. 5th season, was a wide receiver in a triple option offense in college, suspended from 2017 for substance abuse violations. But now you're seeing what he's become in this offense here. And it's always a tricky thing when you have to stash away somebody and you've got to invest in kind of that long term. But, man, this is what it looks like when it comes through. And he's been awesome.
He's a number 1 also in tight end DYAR, and he has an 88% catch rate this year.
And he just came out with a rap album.
Really? Is it good?
You might want to check it out. D-Wall.
D-Wall?
Yep.
Interesting.
You can find it on Spotify.
Can he compete with like Damian Lillard? Is he on that level?
We might have to have a rap battle to figure it out.
A rap battle?
Yeah, can we get them on the show?
Get the two of them? Yeah, no problem. Aaron's got the history in the music game, so he can host the rap battle.
Not so much in the rap game, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but you got the street cred.
If they're going to have a grunge rock game, bring back Black Jack McDowell, man. 90s grunge rock. That's more my history.
As Corey and I silently nod, like we know what that is.
Remember Black Jack McDowell? He pitched for the Chicago White Sox, and he made music on the side.
So Corey did know what it was.
I knew Jack McDowell now with the additional context, but I did not know about the music.
No knowledge here. Ignorant Matt. Next most important game. This is the biggest for the Super Bowl. What do we have, Aaron?
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of rap fans, apparently a gigantic rap fan is Kyle Shanahan. And if you want a game this week that actually has 2 teams with winning records, here we go.
That's funny because I watched Succession, and Kyle Shanahan reminds me of Kendall. I feel like they look alike, and he had like the rap L to the OG. So I'm picturing like Kyle Shanahan doing the L to the OG rap, and I love
the
it.
IKE, baby. He's rapping to his dad about zone reads. Carolina at San Francisco. Carolina makes the playoffs 58% of the time if they win, 31% of the time if they lose. San Francisco, 97% if they win, 85% if they lose. Reach the Super Bowl 33% of the time with a win, 25% of the time with a loss. Like I said, I think this might be the only game this week where 2 teams have winning records. So this is a pretty good game for this week, and it's a pretty good game for defense. Obviously, the Patriots and 49ers defenses are playing at a historic level right now. But the Panthers defense is 3rd in DVOA behind those 2 defenses, and they're 3rd against the pass behind those 2 defenses. And they should control a San Francisco offense that has dropped 11 spots in our rankings over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, interesting kind of tidbit here on this game. Kyle Allen and Jimmy Garoppolo are both better throwing without play action this year than they are with play action. So both are averaging 8 expected points added per 100 plays more on non-play action than on play action. And we're always talking about how that we generally see the opposite split. Of course, we're always encouraging more and more play action. And I think we both think of these offenses as very play action built. I wonder
3rd
if we're
and 4th, in fact. 3rd and 4th in the amount of play action that they run this year.
So I wonder if it's sort of an equilibrium that we might be approaching in terms of play action usage for all of the speaking of how we should, it could just be, small sample size, individual things going on. But something interesting to keep an eye on that I'll definitely be watching is Kyle Allen and Jimmy Garoppolo and how they perform in the straight drop back game.
Yeah, it might be. The other team that's really high in play action, which is Indianapolis, is also basically the same. But then on the other hand, you have Minnesota that's been like second in play action and is ridiculously better when they use play action.
High usage, high efficiency.
I think those are three teams that really, it makes sense why they use a high rate of play action. The threat of Christian McCaffrey getting the ball is something you have to account for on defense. The 49ers run the ball a ton, so faking the ball to the running back, you have to respect it. Same with the Vikings.
And there's going to be a lot of running in this game because both of these defenses are much better against the pass than they are against the run. Carolina is actually 30th against the run this year. So they've got to figure out how to limit runs and put Jimmy Garoppolo in the tough down and distance situations. San Francisco is 2 against the pass, 12th against the run. So there's probably a big dose of Christian McCaffrey coming their way.
Yeah, it has the makings to be kind of a low-scoring slugfest here in this one, which could play into the Niners' hands. Corey, what are you looking out for in this one?
I'm interested to know if you guys think Kyle Allen is kind of playing for his job here. I think it's an interesting situation, one that plays out well for Carolina as Cam Newton gets healthy. If Kyle Allen plays great again and they win, you kind of ride with him. But in a tough matchup against San Francisco, if he doesn't play well and Newton's healthy next week, it's pretty easy to go back to him. Yeah, I'll be interested to get your guys' take on that. But Kyle Allen has been really good and warrants the opportunity to keep starting as long as he keeps playing well. San Francisco plays a ton of cover 3 and cover 4. And against those two defenses, Kyle Allen has been really good. He's been accurate on 44 of 50 passes against those offenses for 8.2 yards per attempt. That's the highest on target rate with a minimum of 50 attempts against those two zone schemes.
The problem is, are you comparing Kyle Allen to the Cam Newton that we've seen over the last year, or are you comparing him to the Cam Newton that we think we can see if Cam Newton is healthy? Because the Cam Newton that we've seen over the last year is not healthy. So those numbers don't necessarily reflect what Cam Newton would do if he is in fact healthy. And Allen has been good, but he hasn't been spectacular. I mean, he's been above average, but he's played an easy schedule of opposing defenses this year.
Right. We kind of joked about him Wally Pipp and Cam Newton all the way at the beginning when he first came in that first game. But at the end of the day, I think this question actually isn't about like anything that we've seen in terms of what we've seen. Yeah, on the surface, I say keep playing Kyle Allen, and then if until he's always playing for his job. Just like everybody should be that's competing for their livelihood in NFL. But I was watching Get Up this morning, and I thought they had like a similar kind of misguided debate where it was about should Mahomes play this weekend? And it went, well, you can't risk Mahomes playing this weekend, or of course he's a football player, players play. And the conversation needs to be, what do we know about his condition and what the chances are of re-injury? And so with this question, there's got to be knowledge from the Panthers who are seeing these guys in practice every day, that are understanding more about Cam Newton's medical history than we could ever know, that are analyzing just all kinds of factors that aren't in front of our faces, that we can't possibly know enough about to be saying this should be this way, this should be that way. So on the surface, I want to say, yeah, they're competing for that, and that's all good and well. But at the end of the day, the team's got to earn their money right now and figure this out. They got to figure out who's going to be helping them win games. Is it Kyle Allen, who has an answer for zone coverage that Cam Newton hasn't had for at least half a season? Or is it the physical upside of Cam Newton, and just Kyle Allen is only going to be somebody that they can kind of be a win-with guy at best?
It depends on his health. I think it depends a lot. I think if they're both 100% healthy, if Cam Newton is 100% healthy, I think Cam Newton is the guy to go with. But if Cam Newton's only 80% healthy, Kyle Allen might be better.
And no problem right now. We don't want to see Cam Newton against that San Francisco front. Nick Bosa has been as good as advertised. He was our top defensive end in the SIS football rookie handbook, and he ranks 5th in the NFL in pressure rate at 18% amongst players with 50 or more pass rushing snaps. All right, one more big game to talk about this week, sort of. Aaron, what do you got for the third most important game of the week?
Well, as big as a game could be this week, again, I there aren't a lot of games matching two teams with winning records. So here's a game matching one team with a winning record against a team that we thought would have a winning record, and that's Philadelphia at Buffalo. Buffalo goes to the playoffs 80% of the time if they win, 60% if they lose. Philadelphia 40% if they win, 22% if they lose. And I think the interesting one in this one is the rushing passing splits. The Philadelphia defense is much stronger against the run than the pass, but the Buffalo offense is much stronger running than passing. They're fifth in DVOA running, only 26th passing, and they're actually first in adjusted line yards, which is our blocking metric.
Yeah, I've got some tough stats coming from Bryce Rossler on Josh Allen. I'm just going to read what he put down here. Josh Allen is dead last in the league in rushing total points earned. He's got negative 13 rushing total points earned this year. He's 108th in total points earned per carry amongst players with 10 or more carries. Only Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Derek Carr are worse. So given what we know about quarterback runs generally being more efficient, according to Bryce, that's exceptionally embarrassing.
It's really interesting, actually, if I could just interrupt, because we have Josh Allen as a fairly average runner this year, and I wonder where the disconnect is. Which of those runs do we score very differently than you? He does have 2 fumbles. It's not like last year when Lamar Jackson fumbled like 8 times or whatever.
Right. Jackson's fumbles totally crushed him. The fumbles hurt Josh Allen some. Going on, I'll give some other stats, though. For as much as he likes to run around and they like to get him throwing on the move, he ranks 25th out of 34 quarterbacks in expected points added per play in on-the-run passing, so passes when he's on the move. He also ranks 32nd out of 33rd in passing total points earned per attempt on throws that are 20 or more air yards down the field. So as Bryce concluded, people talk about his legs and his big arms as positives, but he's actually just extremely abysmal, bad, and or not good at all, end quote.
That's a Bryce quote if I've ever heard it.
Yeah, Bryce, what do you really think?
Maybe he's actually learned how to throw short passes, though. Like, he can actually connect on them now.
I will say that's been one thing that's surprising. Because I think when you looked at the skill set, you saw, obviously, great athleticism, big guy, has the arm strength to throw it anywhere on the field, throws deep balls that look like they're Marino out of his hand, the way the spiral comes off the ball and the way that it kind of soars through the air. But you were worried just about the inconsistent accuracy all over the place. And it's actually been the case that, as the stats have bared out, he's had really poor accuracy down the field, where you would think that his arm strength would kind of project to him improving in that area. And it's been in the short game that he's been okay. He hasn't been spraying the ball all over the place in the short game, and that's actually been the one aspect of the Bills' passing game. You know, we didn't think we were going to see a continuation of Tyrod Taylor with this skill set, but that's been the one thing that he's sort of been good at.
Yeah, on the other side of the ball, by the way, the Buffalo defense is much stronger passing. It's the opposite of their offense. So they're much stronger against the pass than the run. Want to bring a little attention to Tre'Davious White, 4th in yards per pass, 6th in success rate among qualifying cornerbacks. So he's having an awesome season. Levi Wallace is 12th in yards per pass, 33rd in success rate. So he's also having a pretty good season. And it's a very different cornerback play in this game between the two teams, because that's where Philadelphia is super weak.
Yeah, and Tre'Davious White, it was funny watching the last game. Ryan Fitzpatrick totally avoided him. Finally, he tested him one time throwing in his direction. Tre'Davious White emerges with the football, no helmet on. Somehow he lost his helmet in the process, but he's the one that came away with the football the first time he targeted him. So he's just unbelievable.
Yeah, Tre'Davious White is one of the best cornerbacks in the league and worth avoiding. Levi Wallace on the other side of the field has been targeted a ton as a result, but he's been, like Aaron alluded to, keeping receivers at bay. So that's working in their favor. The Eagles cornerbacks on the other hand, not a pretty sight. And I could see, just based on alignment tendencies, a decent amount of John Brown versus Roswell Douglas this week. And I think that favors the Bills and John Brown, just from the standpoint of how both of the players play their game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Sign me up for John Brown. But records aside, I know this is a 5-1 team against a 3-4 team. I think the Eagles are the better team. I know they're going on the road to Buffalo, but I actually like them in this game. I think the matchup plays out well. I don't think the Bills have enough in their passing game to really make the Eagles feel the pain on that side of the ball. And I think at the end of the day, the Eagles kind of get this one right back on track. But, this should have to be – we'll see if this week is as chalky as last week was.
Yeah, subjectively, I'm with you. Objectively, yeah, Philadelphia is the better team, but the home field advantage to Buffalo would suggest that Buffalo would have the better chance of winning. Subjectively, I just feel like Philadelphia is a playoff contender. Like, they're not going to go to 3-5. I mean, that's a totally subjective, like from the heart kind of feeling. But I just feel like this team is more well-rounded and better than this record. And they don't look to me like a team that's going to completely fall apart.
Yeah, but Buffalo can run them over. If Josh Allen has a big game, then, I mean, you can call the fat lady in because it's over, I think, for that team.
It's going to be hard to come back from 3-5 in this year's NFC. I mean, it's going to be hard just to make the wild card in this year's NFC.
We talked about all the poor Josh Allen stats, and another one to add to that is the fact that he's been really bad when faced with pressure, and the Eagles get the highest pressure rate in the league on opposing quarterbacks. So that's a dangerous situation for Josh Allen, but he does like to scramble a lot when in the face of pressure. Last season had the most scramble attempts due to pressure. Again, this season has the most scramble attempts due to pressure, and over the course of all those carries is averaging 8.8 yards per attempt. So maybe he picks up a few key first downs and keeps them in the game. We'll see what happens.
Everybody's favorite baseball publication is back and ready to help you through the offseason. The 2020 Bill James Handbook is available now from activesports.com. This year's big feature, a look at our new part system, which provides the best publicly available evaluation of infielder defense out there. Curious about which infielders are really the best at playing in the field? We've got you covered. Also, check out the winners of the 2019 Fielding Bible Award. Essays on pace of play, the Hall of Fame, and more from Bill James and the Sports Info Solutions team of research experts. We've got 2020 pitcher and hitter projections, complete career data on every major leaguer and top prospect, and every leaderboard you could possibly want. That's the 2020 Bill James Handbook, available at bookstores now, at activesports.com, or wherever you order books online.
Up next, we have John Verros on for his injury insights. John, what do you have for us this week?
So let's start with the Detroit Lions and their star running back in Kerryon Johnson, who was placed on IR this past week after undergoing surgery on his right knee. This is sort of a mysterious injury. The Lions have not given us an official diagnosis. What Matt Patricia did say, though, was that there was a chance for Kerryon to return later in the year to be a candidate of the return off of IR, which is a kind of mysterious thing to say, considering that he did undergo surgery. So I went ahead and saw every play that Kerryon was a part of in this past week against the Vikings.
Yeah, so this is, sorry to cut you off, this is something that I don't know if everybody realizes what you're doing here. You're reviewing all of the video of all the different injuries that are going on every week. And then sometimes when you have one of these kind of high-profile situations where it's not really clear what happened there, you're going back on the film. So, yeah, sorry to cut you off. What did you find?
Yeah, no worries. So what I found was actually that there was nothing. There was a series of plays, though, that I did see Kerryon get up gingerly. He got up kind of awkwardly a few times trying to prevent any weight from going onto his right leg. He was limping around back to the huddle. He just didn't look comfortable at all.
But no like acute injury moment or anything like that.
Yeah, there was no specific moment in time where he could have sustained some sort of a serious injury, which leads me to believe that this was a meniscus injury or an overuse injury. His meniscus has been probably wearing away over time, making those sharp and heavy cuts that he likes to make. That's part of his game. Now, there were reports saying that he was seen after he went into the locker room. He came back out and had a sleeve over his right knee, and he was riding the stationary bike. So I'm assuming he had some inflammation and swelling, and he was just trying to see if he could get his knee back to some sort of fluidity and it being able to use it again.
So when you say this meniscus injury that you're kind of surmising from here, and they said he had surgery, but you're not sure what it is, it sounds like, would that be like a clean out type of surgery? Is that sort of thing what's possible there?
Yeah, so actually with less severe meniscus injuries, the procedure is to just remove the frayed pieces or torn parts. If it was a more severe tear, they would actually go in and more likely to suture it up. You can't just remove an entire meniscus like it's the 60s anymore.
Gotcha. All right. That's Kerryon Johnson. let's go back to our favorite position to talk about. I'm always going to ask you about those QBs. Matt Ryan, I can't remember the last time he's missed a game. I don't even know if he ever has. The Falcons seem kind of out of it, but what do you make of his status?
Yeah, so he's an Iron Man, and I don't actually know if he's going to miss this upcoming week, but he does have a low severity right high ankle sprain. He was landed on from behind, rolled up on by Aaron Donald this past week, and he left the game because of that.
And when you say high ankle sprain, that basically means you're rolling up on kind of the inside part of your ankle as opposed to the outside. Is that the usual difference there, or?
Yeah, so unlike more of like a basketball like ankle roll or a lateral ankle sprain, a high ankle sprain is going to be more often or not because of someone landing on your ankle, and your ankle is going to externally rotate or like go to the outside while someone lands on you.
But this one, low severity here. So, I mean, we talked about tightrope surgery for the high ankle sprains a couple weeks back. I know Tua is doing it again. To a tightrope, doing his other ankle this time there. But what do we think is not necessary for this situation for Matt Ryan?
Yeah, I don't think he's a candidate for a surgery like that. This being a low-grade sprain, I don't think he's going to need any sort of procedure to get this corrected. Now, Dan Quinn has come out and said to the media that his quarterback doesn't have to practice at all for him to play this coming week. And surely enough, Matty Ice has not practiced yet this week. So, I mean, it's a day-to-day sort of situation here. He could be like Pat Mahomes, where he has this low-grade high ankle sprain and he tries to play through it, and he's just sort of less mobile and taking more hits than usual because he can't escape the pocket like he wants to. So it's something to monitor, and we could be seeing Matty Ice this upcoming week.
All right, so you think there's a good chance that he plays. Awesome. Thanks again for coming on, John, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks again to all of our listeners. As a reminder, please review us on iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. You can find Corey on Twitter at Corey_March1. That's Corey_March, the number 1. You can find John Verros on Twitter at VerrosJohn, at VERROSJOHN, along with, as always, at SportsInfo_SIS and at FB Outsiders. The Bill James Handbook is available for pre-order now, and word on the street is that if you order through actasports.com, that's ACTA sports.com, you'll get a special free gift along with your purchase. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our guest host, Corey March, our injury expert, John Verros, and our producer, Justin Stein, along with our researcher, Bryce Rossler, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.